Salary secrets. They never teach you. What if the company you've been loyal to for years is quietly paying you less, not because you underperform, but precisely because you stayed? Picture this. You've spent 6 years climbing the ladder at the same company. You're the person they call when something complicated needs fixing. Your performance reviews are glowing. And yet, come Friday afternoon, your manager slides a number across the table that feels less like a reward and more like a shrug. 3%? Again. That night, you open a spreadsheet, not a work one. A personal one you've been quietly building, cross-referencing job postings, LinkedIn salary data, numbers whispered by ex-colleagues who left. The gap between what the market pays someone with your skills and what you actually earn stares back at you. It's not a rounding error. It's somewhere between 18 and 23%. So, what's actually happening here? To understand it, you need to know how companies price your loyalty and why the system was never designed to work in your favor. Every job inside a company exists within what HR calls a pay band, a defined floor, midpoint, and ceiling calibrated against market data. The catch? That data might be 3, 4, or 5 years old. Pay bands don't auto-update. They shift when HR runs a full compensation review, which happens rarely, slowly, and almost never in the direction of existing employees. In your first few years, raises feel meaningful. The system appears fair. But somewhere around year 3 or 4, the math changes. You've drifted toward the top of your band, not because of some promotion, just because you stayed and performed. And once you're near the ceiling, annual increases become symbolic. The system has classified you, in the dry language of HR software, as compa-ratio maxed. You're already considered fully compensated, so it stops pushing. Nobody announces this to you. There's no meeting where your manager says, "You've hit the ceiling of your band. Future raises will be minimal unless your role changes." That conversation almost never happens. Not because managers are hiding something sinister, but because most of them don't think in those terms either. They receive a budget, a spreadsheet, and a list of names. They distribute accordingly. This creates what labor economists call the loyalty penalty, a measurable, documented cost of staying at the same company. Research consistently shows that people who change employers every 2 to 3 years out-earn those who rely on internal raises over a decade. Not because they're more talented, not because they work harder, but because external hires are priced at today's market rates, while internal raises are anchored to a band that barely moves. But there's a second layer to this problem, and it's less about structure and more about information asymmetry. When you sit down for your annual review, your manager already knows several things you don't. They know where your salary sits within the band. They know the band ceiling. They know what the market currently pays for your role. Because HR runs that analysis every time they recruit externally, even if that data never reaches you. They know what replacing you would actually cost. You, sitting across the table, typically know your current salary, last year's raise, and whatever fragments you've pieced together from casual conversations. The information gap is enormous, and that gap, more than any performance metric, is what determines the outcome of the negotiation. You think is just a review. Every high-stakes negotiation follows the same logic. The party with the fuller picture of reality holds the structural advantage. In salary conversations, that party is almost always the employer, not because they're adversarial, but because the system was designed with no mechanism to share that information proactively. So, what breaks the ceiling? Not harder work, not waiting for the right review cycle, not making yourself indispensable and hoping someone notices. The ceiling breaks when you close the information gap, when you arrive with a documented, defensible understanding of your market position that the company can no longer pretend doesn't exist. That means building your own intelligence file, cross-referencing salary data from multiple sources, not just one job board, talking to people who recently made lateral moves, mapping your actual scope of responsibility against comparable roles at comparable companies, finding a number you trust enough to defend. When you walk into that meeting armed with data rather than frustration, the dynamic shifts entirely. Your manager's silence, that slight pause before they respond, tells you everything they didn't know you knew, and a 3% raise can't survive contact with a documented reality. The 3% raise isn't an assessment of your worth. It's a test of your awareness. The company's opening position every year is whatever they calculate you'll accept. Your counterposition is whatever you actually know. Update your market data every 6 months, not because you're always planning to leave, but because your compensation is a negotiation that never fully closes, and the system will offer what it calculates you'll accept for as long as you let it. A ceiling only works as a ceiling for people who don't realize they're standing under one.